Thank you so much. It's always a privilege for me to travel the world and to share my story. And before I do that, I just want to say to Hazak, this organization that inspires people to come closer to the Torah, that you couldn't be doing a better thing, especially in today's world and in today's environment. What I'm going to do with you this evening is to share a vignette of short stories and explain to you how I, as an ordained minister, how I came to Israel my first time. And the first time I visited Israel, I knew I wanted to live there, and I knew I was willing to leave everyone and everything behind to fulfill that vision. Often, when I lecture at seminaries and universities, university and seminary students can ask very difficult questions. And they ask me, Ahuva, how do you make sense of your journey? And what were the spiritual pushes and pulls along the way that could cause a person like yourself to make such a radical metamorphosis? The best way I have of explaining my story is the same way the Vilna Gaon explains it. It is brought down by our rabbis of blessed memory that before Hashem gave the Torah over to the Jewish people at Har Sinai, that he went around to all the other nations, and even though the majority of those people turned the Torah down, it is brought down that there were individual souls among those people that wanted the Torah, and they explain a person like myself, if you will, as a Gilgul, a reincarnation of one of those souls. That's probably the best way I have of explaining it as well, because if someone had said to me, I'd have to say 16 years ago, you are going to move to Israel and you are going to convert to Judaism, I would have said, you are crazy. The first trip I took to Israel, I was with a group of Catholics. Here I was, this Protestant ordained minister. We were coming around that first curve from Tel Aviv into Jerusalem, and my heart started pulsating like it was coming out of my chest. And I said, oh my God, I'm at home. And when I said that, I really meant it, because I used to be a flight attendant and I had traveled to 4 of the major continents. But Israel is the first place I traveled that my neshama, my soul, felt rooted and knitted to the land. I still feel that way today. I'm one of these people that have the Meshugas. I do not leave Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, unless I get a bracha from Rabbi Eliashiv, and I think most of you know who he is. He is the posek of Jerusalem, and he's one of the holiest men alive. But I don't leave Eretz Israel unless I get a bracha from Rabbi Eliashiv, because I want the assurance of knowing that if I leave the land of Israel, that I'm going to make it back there safely. Coming around the first curve from Tel Aviv into Jerusalem, my heart's pulsating like it's coming out of my chest. I said, oh my God, I'm at home. Isaiah 40 has always been one of my favorite chapters in the Tanakh. And there are some verses, some pasukim in there that says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, lift up your voice, lift it up with strength. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold, Hashem will come with a strong arm, and his reward is with him. He should gather his sheep unto himself and lead his flock like a shepherd. After I quoted those verses, I started singing to the top of my lungs, and you're familiar with those pasukim. I started singing to the top of my lungs. There was this lovely Catholic lady sitting next to me, and she looked at me like I was losing my mind. And I looked at this lady, and I said, I'm going to live in Israel one day. And she looked at me with a smirk on her face as if to say, yeah, sure. And I said to myself, I don't care if this lady believes me or not, because I probably will not ever see her again, and I have not. I said, but if anyone will believe me, my dear friend Thomas Johnson, that I was licensed with in the ministry in Los Angeles, where I lived for 10 years, he will believe me. I flew LL Airlines back to Los Angeles, and I was jet lagged, of course. But I want to preface this part of my story by saying, if you had a praying grandmother and she taught you the Tehillim, the book of Psalms, when you were 4 years old, of all the sites in Israel that you think would have had the most impact on me, and it's in Jerusalem, I'll give you a hint. Which site do you think that would have been? The kotel. You're 100% right. Here I was as ordained minister, and don't kid yourself, Christians know the significance of that holy site. I had this big plastic bag full of prayer requests, and not only that, I was there sticking all of these prayer requests in the wall, and about 45 minutes later, a lady tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "Excuse me, but the bus is leaving." I want you to know I found myself backing back from the kotel. Here I was as an ordained minister because I wanted that holy site to be forever embedded in my mind. And as I was backing back from the kotel, Psalms 121 has always been one of my favorites, and I learned it at a very, very early age, and some of you are familiar with that one. And I know we don't quote Tehillim between Skia and Hatzos, but for learning purposes, it's okay. Psalms 121 says, "I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, for which cometh my help. All of my help cometh from Hashem. He will not suffer your foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Hashem is your shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. He'll preserve you from evil. He'll preserve your soul. He'll preserve your going out and coming in from this time forth, even from evermore." And I finally finished up that pasuk, and I was still backing back from the kotel. But getting back to my story about Thomas Johnson, this dear friend of mine, I called him, and he and I met the next day for lunch, and I was explaining to him all the exciting places that I'd read about, studied about, and not only that, had visited for the first time in my life, and this must have taken about an hour. And at the end of that hour conversation over lunch, I looked at him, and this is someone that knew me extremely well, and I said to him, "Thomas, I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to live in Israel one day." And he looked at me and he said this. Now, my English name, my birth name is Delores, and they used to call me sister in the church. He said, "Sister Delores, please don't tell anyone that you're losing it. However, I want you to know I stand here before you tonight. I am not losing it." When I write about that story in my first book entitled My Sister the Jew, I explain it this way. When you have a dream and you have a vision and you share it with people before it's fruition, they may laugh at you, but so what? I had the dream and vision that I tucked away in my heart. There's a pasuk in Micah 3:6 that says, "The vision is yet for an appointed time. In the end, the vision will speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not tarry." The catalyst for my making my decision to move to Eretz Israel, it happened January 17, 1994. Do we have any Californians in this room by any chance? Probably not. It's perfectly okay. I just lectured on the West Coast, and all of the Los Angeles people are very familiar with this part of my story. But I need to preface this by saying, after that first visit to Eretz Israel, I went back to Israel 14 times in 4 years. I started my own travel agency specializing in group movements to Israel, Egypt, and Greece. I was an entrepreneur. Every time I had a group going to Israel, I got on the plane and I went with them. Everyone that knew me thought I was absolutely losing my mind, but it was like a magnet. I simply could not stay away. It's like a magnet today. I still cannot stay away. And one of the things, you know what's so interesting is, to be honest with you, I feel more at home in Israel than I do the country of my birth, and that is America, and I was born and raised in Chicago. And every time I have to leave Israel, this is not planned, but I sit at my table and I'm having dinner in the evening, and all of a sudden the night before my departure, tears literally start rolling down my eyes, and I sit there and say to myself, who on earth would ever want to leave here? I mean, it's really just the way I feel. So getting back to January 17, 1994, I had instituted a lot of Jewish practices in my life. I had no idea what Torah observant Jews did on a daily basis. However, on one of those visits to Eretz Israel in 14 times in 4 years, I ended up in the mystical city of Safas, and I love reading. And I happened to be in this bookstore, and I saw a book on the shelf that said Siddur, Jewish prayer book. I had not ever seen one before in my life, and I picked it up. It had Hebrew on one side, it had English on the other side, and I said, these are the most powerful prayers I have ever seen. And I purchased the Siddur this particular day. I happened to get back on the bus, and I happened to open up to Birkat Hamazon. I had not ever seen that before either, but my grandmother, may she rest in peace, taught me those Tehillim at a very early age. And I happened to open up to when we say I was young, and now I'm old, and I've not seen a righteous man forsaken, nor his children begging for bread. Hashem will bless his people. Hashem will bless his people with peace. I started sobbing on the bus that particular day because I realized that all the moral, ethical teaching that my parents and grandparents had taught me at a very, very early age was contained in that Siddur. Not only that, I taught my own self the Hebrew alphabet. And not only that, I want you to know when I first started learning how to daven Shacharitz, it used to take me 4 hours to get through Shacharitz. I think we call it nates. I would get up that early. And then I got it down to 3.5 hours, then 3 hours, and then 2.5 hours, then 2 hours, then 1 hour and 45 minutes. I am a very determined person. And then I got it down to 1 hour and then 40 minutes. And Baruch Hashem, now I can daven in Hebrew in 40 minutes. It's in my humble opinion, if anyone was to ask me what transformed my life, I would have to honestly say it is the Hebrew prayers. In my opinion, everything that a Jew needs to perfect him and herself is contained in our Shmoneh Esrei and those 19 benedictions. And every morning when I'm davening, I just, you know what, it's amazing to me. Like, in my humble opinion, I just say to myself, Hashem, how does a person make it through a day without davening? I mean, I personally don't even leave my home unless I daven, because to me, that's where my koach comes from. That's where my strength comes from. So here I was, this ordained minister, davening from a Jewish siddur 3 times a day, because I had read in the Tehillim at a very, very early age that King David davened 3 times a day. And I said to him, and I'd already been davening 3 times a day before I bought that siddur. And I said to myself, if King David prays 3 times a day, I should be praying 3 times a day. I also felt that if I was going to talk to God, I should wash my hands before I went into prayer. I knew nothing about Modeh Ani, but I certainly know about it now. Also, I had a mezuzah on my door, and some of you are sitting there with a very strange look on your face, and you're probably wondering what on earth would an ordained minister be doing with the mezuzah on her door. And don't worry, you have every right to have that strange look on your face, because I lived in the San Fernando Valley in California, and one day there was a lovely Jewish man to ring the bell to my condominium, and I buzzed him in. He came up the stairs, and he asked me if I would like to subscribe to the LA Times, and I thanked him very much, and I said I already received the paper. About 2 seconds later, there was a knock at the door, and it was that same young man, and he said, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" And I said, "Well, I look very Jewish, don't I?" And I said, "No, I'm not Jewish." And he said, "Could you please explain to me why you have a mezuzah on your door?" And I said to him this: the church I attend is a very erudite man. His name is Dr. Charles C. Queen, and he had been to Israel many, many times before my first visit. And on one of those visits, he bought a mezuzah for everyone in his congregation. And I had read in the Torah how to hang it up properly, so I had it hang it up properly on my door. And not only that, when I quoted the Pesukim contained in that mezuzah, this young man almost plots, and I'm going to ask everyone to turn their mobile phones off, their cell phones off. And when I quoted the Pesukim contained in that mezuzah, this young man almost plots, and he looked at me and he said this: "You are a very unusual person." He says, "I have not ever heard of an ordained minister with a mezuzah on her door." And I said, "Neither have I." And I'm like any other Jewish mother. He was backing down the stairs backwards, and he kept saying to me, "You're a very unusual person. I have not ever heard of an ordained minister with a mezuzah on her door." So here I was, an ordained minister, davening from my siddur 3 times a day. I used to say Modeh Ani before I went into prayer. And not only that, I had a mezuzah on my door. January 17th, 1994. That day will be forever embedded in my mind. It was 4:30 a.m. in the morning, and I had a practice of getting up at 5 o'clock every morning. I had a built-in time clock. I looked at the clock, and I said, "It's a bit early. I think I'll stay in bed a little longer." At 4:32 a.m., my bed starts shaking very violently. I'm not a fearful person. However, at first I said to myself this: I used to be a flight attendant for Continental Airlines, and I said, perhaps you are on an airplane, and this is bad turbulence. And when I was shaken from the bed to the floor, I said, get up, girl. It's not a dream. It's an earthquake. I got up. Reality set in. I got up. I started running. I fell down a second time by the stairwell that led to the loft. And when I fell down a second time, there was this wood beam in the ceiling with plants dangling back and forth. It looked like the wood beam as well as the plants were going to come tumbling down on my head. One thing I'm grateful to my grandmother for is whenever I get into any difficulty, it seems like the appropriate Tehillim just kind of springs up in my neshama. The Psalms that came to my mind this particular morning was Psalms 24. I'm sure some of you in this room know this one as well. It says, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. He has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hills of Hashem, or who shall stand in his holy place? He that has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully, he shall receive the blessings of Hashem and the righteousness of the God of his salvation. This is the generation that seek you, that seek your face, O Jacob Shelah. Lift up ye heads, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts is the King of glory. By the time I got to that last pasuk, I finally regained my equilibrium. I got to my feet, ran to the front door, got the door open, ran down the stairs. A neighbor of mine was screaming violently. I threw my arms around the neighbor, started praying for her. She and I went and sat by the jacuzzi. And as I sat by the jacuzzi this particular morning, I said, you have been saying you want to move to Israel. I made that decision. This earthquake registered 6.7 on the Richter scale. It was on two faults that crisscrossed each other. I was 7 minutes from the epicenter, which is where the impact hit. And the aftershocks were just as potent as the original impact. I sat down there for 2 hours, and about 2 hours later, I got the courage to go back up to my condominium. And when I went back up to my condominium, I literally could not believe my eyes. Now, I was very steeped in my gashmias and my materialism, and I had lots of it. However, when I walked through that door, I could not believe my eyes. Every piece of my antique furniture was turned upside down. Those plants that were dangling from the ceiling were on the floor. All of the large plants and pottery were turned upside down, and the pottery was broken. And ladies, when I went in the kitchen and saw all of my crystal and china broken that I had purchased in London, I almost plucked. Then my attention shifted from my materialism, from my gashmias, to my sister who lives in Beverly Hills. And I tried calling her. The telephone lines were down. After that, I ran and found a right and left shoe. I don't even think they were matching. I found my car keys and a Bible. And I was praying that my Mercedes-Benz wasn't crushed because it was underneath the condominium complex. I found my keys, locked the door, ran downstairs to the garage, and my car was fine. Normally, when I go to my sister's, when I would leave the San Fernando Valley going to Beverly Hills, I would take the freeway. It was the San Diego-Santa Monica freeway. However, since the ground was shaking so violently, I said, take the local streets. And sure enough, when I turned the radio on this particular morning, the same intersection that I would have had to take in to get to my sister's, a policeman had plunged to his death. Tonight, I know it was Hashkafa Pratis, divine providence, that I took the local streets because I may not be standing here before you tonight. I get to my sister's. She has no damage in her apartment whatsoever. The only thing that had happened to her is a lamppost had fallen on her Cherokee Jeep. Our parents had been trying to get through to us for about 3 to 4 hours. Finally, they got through. My mother says to my sister, Nellie, please put Delores on the phone. I know she's moving back home. And I could hear my dad saying in the background, is Delores moving back home to Chicago? And I said, Mom, tell Dad I'm not moving back home to Chicago. I'm moving to Israel. And my mother's voice went up so high. And she said to me this, now I know some of you in this room have heard this, and I know some of you in this room have said this. My mother said this. She said, Delores, I have no idea what is going on in your life. She said, you used to be one of the most obedient children I had. She said, I'm going to put your father on the phone, and perhaps he can talk some sense into you. My dad came to the phone and he said this. He said, Delores, I think you're just a bit shaken up by the earthquake. I said, Dad, that's true. I am shaken up. He says, calm down. He says, we'll call you back in a couple of days and we'll have a family conference. My parents called me back in 2 days. I stayed with my sister in Beverly Hills. And when they saw they could not talk me out of this decision, they gave me their blessings. But their concerns were the concerns of any other parent. My dad said this. He said, Delores, where are you going to live? How are you going to support yourself? And he said, you don't know the language. I said, Dad, those are all great questions. I said, I have no idea where I'm going to live. I have no idea how I'm going to support myself. And I said, I'll learn the language. Now, I highly recommend that if anyone in this room plans on making Aliyah, do it more reasonably and give it more thought than I did. In my humble opinion, when I moved to Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, Hashem was really watching out for me, as he always does. And I landed in one of the most beautiful communities in the whole wide world. It is Bayit VeGan. It translates as house and garden. And not only that, in my neighborhood, I call my Rebbetzin and my Rabbi Leib Hyman and Haya Hyman, my Abba and Ima, because both my parents are dead. And often when I travel the world, and I have been, privileged to lecture in such exotic places as Hong Kong, all over Australia, South Africa, London, the Kiruv organization there, Encounter, all over America and all over Canada. And when I lecture, sometimes people ask me, Ahuva, do you have family in Israel? I go, of course I have family in Israel. And I name all the families that loved and supported me throughout my conversion process. And I'll say, of course I have family. I have Abraham Schwartzbaum. He wrote the Bamboo Cradle. And I'll say, of course I have family. I had Rabbi Aryeh Carmel Satzal, who wrote Master Plan, and Miriam Levy, who has written many, many books. And I could go on and on down the list of famous authors that live in Bayit VeGan. I just find it very humbling that Hashem would place me in such a loving, beautiful community. And the one thing I love about, when I leave Israel and I come back, my neighbors get my shopping list of what I need before I return. There's a welcome sign on the door. And I got all of my vegetables because I juice vegetables 3 times a day, and they leave me muffins and balloons. It's an amazing thing. And it's the same thing that you experience in your communities as well. So my parents saw they could not talk me out of this decision. I was 48 years old, and they gave me their blessings. And I moved to Bayit VeGan. And the next challenge I faced was this, is I had to go to the Jerusalem Beth Din to open up my file for my conversion, my teak. Now, in my book, My Sister the Jew, I call my conversion a Harvard conversion because you know in America that Harvard University is the most difficult university to get into. The rabbis had already forewarned me that they were going to turn me down my traditional 3 times, and yes, they did. I did not walk in that door and tell them that I was an ordained minister, but what happens in Jerusalem is this, is that before a conversion is completed, they will know everything there is to know about you and more. They closed my file, refused to reopen it. They found out I was an ordained minister. I was in the biggest dilemma I had ever been in my life. And one morning, I was up davening the Shmoneh Esrei, and once again, there's a part in there where we can make a spontaneous request to Hashem. And I simply said this. I said, Hashem, they have closed my file, refused to reopen it. What are you going to do? Because I didn't know what I was going to do. Finished davening. All of a sudden, Rabbi Cohen, he is the chief rabbi of Haifa. I had been privileged to be a guest at their home a few years earlier. I didn't even know if Rabbi Cohen was going to remember who I was. And I called his office in Bayit VeGan. The secretary answered the phone. She put Rabbi Cohen on the phone. I told him the dilemma that I was in. He was instrumental in getting my file reopened. The one thing I love about living in a religious neighborhood is that whatever you're going through, you do not go through it alone. When one of my neighbors, Asnat Goldman, heard that I was going for my 4th interview, because I got a call back from Rabbi Cohen's office 2 weeks later, his secretary put him back on the phone again, and he said to me, Ahuva, you're going for your 4th interview tomorrow. One of my neighbors, Asnat Goldman, in Bayit VeGan, when she heard I was going for my 4th conversion, everybody got real excited. She said, Ahuva, come over. I want to loan you a nice outfit to wear. She lent me a pleated skirt, cardigan blouse, a cardigan sweater, and a beige blouse. And I went back to the dorm at Nishmat, tried that outfit on for my roommates. I put on pearl earrings and a necklace and pulled my hair back in a ponytail. And one of my roommates from the East Coast, Judy, looked at me and she said, Ahuva, you look like you were born Haredi. I said, good. I got up the next morning, put the same outfit back on, and I went to the High Court Gadol, and I was interviewing with the chief rabbi at that time, who was Rabbi Bakshi Doran. No one in Bayit VeGan had ever heard of a chief rabbi getting involved in a conversion case. Rabbi Bakshi Doran was such a gentleman, and he followed such protocol. He sent me outside that door for 15 minutes, and while I was outside that door, I must have quoted every Tehillim I know, and I know quite a few by memory. He called me back in the room and questioned me for 45 minutes. That was my interview. And not only that, at the end of that interview, he looked at me and he said, Ms. Gray, we will be getting back with you in a few days. What happens in Israel is this, is the rabbis try to complete all of the conversion cases before Passover, because Pesach is the redemption of the Jewish people, and it's the redemption of every Jewish neshama. Now, I have a sales and marketing time management background. And if you say you're going to call me and you don't, guess what? I call you. I call that administrative office 3 and 4 times a day. Every day I got that same Rabbi Lato Ellis. He was very, very tolerant and very patient. And finally, by about the 3rd day, he said, Ahuva, he says, we're just waiting for the 3rd signature. He says, in fact, tomorrow you can come and pick up your conversion papers. Once again, everybody in Bayit VeGan got very, very excited, and so was I. And they said, Ahuva, take someone very close to you to the mikvah. Not only that, my dear friend Netanella Ritchie, she agreed to go with me. We picked up my papers. The next day we went to the mikvah, and we had left her children at home alone in Bayit VeGan. And when we got back to the neighborhood, we went directly to her home because she needed to check on her children. When we walked through the door, her youngest son, Abraham Moshe, he looked at his mother. He looks back at me. He looks at his mother again. And he says to his mother in Hebrew, Ima, why is Ahuva still black? I will give you a few minutes to digest that statement. You're in good company, because I want you to know audiences all over the world laugh when I share that part of my story. And when his mother told me what he said, I laughed hysterically as well. Next, I remembered that Rebbe Need Hankins said to come directly back to Nishmat. I went to Nishmat. The door was locked. And I said, this is strange, because Rebbe Need Hankin is so serious about learning. She doesn't close the seminary for no reason. Then I remember she said to come to the Bet Midrash, the study hall. I walked around the corner of a buhab and walked into the door, kissed the mezuzah for the first time as a Jew. I walked in. They had this huge sign that said Siman Tov Ma'aseh Tov Ahuva. They had closed the entire seminary down. Everyone was saying speech, speech. I was speechless. I know that's hard to believe. The only thing I could think to say to them is this, is you have shown me such love, and I don't know that I've experienced this kind of love in my life. And converting to Judaism is the most quality decision I have ever made. I went to the mikvah on my 51st birthday, which was the 1st of Nisan. My sister called to wish me a happy birthday, and it was my English birthday as well. And when I told my sister, I said, Nellie, you won't believe it, but I went to the mikvah today. My sister said, yay, we did it. My family has always supported me throughout all my mushugas. And when I first moved to Israel, my brother Ezra says to me, he says, just give her a couple of months. She'll be back home. I want you to know I have been privileged. It'll be the 1st of Nisan to live in Israel. It will be 15 years this year coming up. Kanai Nahara. Baruch Hashem is one of the wisest decisions I've ever made in my life. And in my humble opinion, I couldn't be living in a better place. And you know what's interesting? You know, before 9/11, people used to laugh at me when I said I felt safer in Israel than anywhere else in the world. But since 9/11, my audiences don't laugh anymore when I say I feel safer in Israel than anywhere in the world. So here I was, completed my conversion. About 10 days later, I got the most beautiful birthday card in the mail from my sister and my brother Ezra and my brother Oscar. And they signed that card and they said this, congratulations, my sister the Jew. We're very proud of you. I have known since I was a teenager, bat mitzvah age, that I was going to write a book. And when I saw that card, congratulations, my sister the Jew, I said, that's the title of that book. I moved out of the dorm at Nishmat. I moved into my second apartment. I did not have a computer, but I want you to know I have a Dell laptop computer today. And I wrote my first book longhand with a legal pad and a pen, because that's the generation I come from. And I sat down in the midst of all of these boxes and started writing. My first book, My Sister the Jew, took literally 5 months. And the reason I was able to write this book in 5 months is because all of my neighbors sent me over the leftover cholent, and my house was not immaculate, and I do like a clean house. But I would get up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, daven, of course, and then I would write until midnight. And the rest of it was editing, re-editing, more re-editing, and deciding what's going in and what's coming out. I want you to know, ladies, that I did not want my picture on the cover of a book. And when I was told that they were putting my picture on the cover of the book, I said, you can't do that. It's intrusive. It's not sanua. It's not modest. And I went on and on and down the list. And the publisher says to me, Ahuva, ask a shaila. Ask your rabbi a question. Now, I hung up that phone totally confident because I called my rabbi and my rebbetzin Abba and Ima, and I was sure they were going to agree with me. I called him up on the phone and I said, Abba, you won't believe it, but the publisher just says they're putting my picture on the cover of the book and they can't do that. It's intrusive. It's not modest. And he listened to me, and about a few seconds later he says, Ahuva, it'll sell more books. I said, what? I said, put Ima on the phone, if you don't get the right answer from your father. He put my rebbetzin on the phone, and she said, Ahuvala, your Abba's right. Ladies, I want you to know, I literally started crying. I go, I don't believe this. I really don't believe it. First book comes out, and I'm asked to come and lecture all over the world, literally, to Hong Kong, South Africa, Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Gold Coast, Brisbane, Cairns, all over Australia, and also to South Africa. I've been privileged to lecture all over London. And after my first book came out, everyone in my neighborhood kept asking me, Ahuva, are you going to write another book? And I said, no, leave me alone. I'm exhausted. I am not writing any more books. However, if an author gets a good enough topic, you will always write another book. And in fact, I'm on my third book, and I got the fourth one in the computer now. The second book is called Gift of Strangers. And this book is about all my travels throughout all the most incredible, amazing Jewish communities all over the world. The most amazing thing I find about being Jewish is, what the Harknoshes Orhing, the hospitality of Jews around the world, how we take a complete stranger into our homes, make them feel like a family member, and you feel absolutely at home. To me, it's still absolutely fascinating. And in my humble opinion, I don't think it exists outside of Yiddishkeit. I lectured in this wonderful, wonderful place called South Africa. And the lead-off story in this book is about a girl from South Africa. She was religious from birth. I was asked by Ishtar Fellowships at that time, it's been 8 years ago since the Intifada broke out, to come and lecture to the smallest group of girls I had lectured to. They were from South Africa and Australia. I'm in the room lecturing, and there was this lovely girl with blonde hair and blue eyes that sat in the front row. She cried throughout my entire lecture. And I could not imagine what interturmoil that my words were causing in this young girl's life. End of lecture. I'm surrounded by all of these lovely young girls, and they're asking me all of these difficult questions because H-Torah Fellowship is for girls, not from a religious background. They're asking me questions. What do I do when I go back home and I want to keep kosher? Can I eat in my mother's non-kosher kitchen? Do I have to cover my elbows, and do I have to stop wearing my pants? And I answered all of their questions as I was taught by my rabbis and rebbetzins in the Yerushalayim. All of a sudden, the young girl with blonde hair and blue eyes came over to me, and she was still crying. She cried for 1 solid hour, and she looked at me and she said this. She says, Ahuva, why are Orthodox Jews so insensitive? And I said, well, I don't think we're insensitive. I said, there's a fence around the Torah, and we have to cut it straight. She says, well, I'm from birth, and I want nothing to do with Orthodox Judaism. She had gone off the derrick. She'd left the path. I gave her my email address. I said, please be in contact. And I said, my first book is coming out. And when I left that room, I did not think I was going to hear from her again. And I did not. A year and a half later, my first book comes out. Rabbi Chokolsky invites me for the first time to come up to Neve Yerushalayim to lecture. I'm walking down the hallways like the good old days, and they're buzzing as they were when I studied there for that 1 year. I go up to the Bet Midrash, to the study hall, and there must be about 200 and some girls in there. My rabbis and rebbetzins are out in the hallway. Rebbetzin Heller, Rabbi Kellerman, Rebbetzin Rodman, Rebbetzin Feldman. And I'm lecturing. I'm sharing funny parts of my story. And all of a sudden, I see this lovely girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. And I have to preface this by saying, rarely do I forget a face. And I'm trying to figure out to myself, where do I know this girl from? I had to stay focused. End of the lecture, once again, I'm surrounded by all of these lovely young women. And I'm autographing books, and I had my head down. All of a sudden, this person comes over to me, and she says in this South African accent, and this is the best South African accent I can do. She says, Ahuva, do you remember who I am? Before I lifted my head, that's not bad, is it? Before I lifted my head, I said, it's that girl from South Africa. And when I saw her, I literally could not believe my eyes. This time, She could pass any Rebbitzin scrutinization. She was dressed so modestly. She wasn't dressed that way the first time I saw her. And I looked at her and I said, what happened to you? And she said this. She says, Ahuva, I want you to know when you told the story about your Baptist grandmother and how she taught you the Tehillim when you were 4 years old, and how those Tehillim narrate your life, and how you were davening from your Siddur 3 times a day, and here I was from birth and had considered those prayers as ancient, irrelevant, and inapplicable. She says, Ahuva, I'm back on the derek. I'm keeping kosher. She says, I'm saying the Shema twice a day, and she says, I'm studying Perkei Avot, and I'm committed to a Torah way of life. Now I'm almost in tears. I look at this girl and I said, can I ask you a question? I said, everyone in my neighborhood has been asking me if I'll write a second book. I said, if you will tell me in your own words what happened to you in that room that day, I said, I will write that book. Her story in her own words, I got it email. I received that email, Erev Rosh Hashanah. This girl is a very, very prolific writer. She explains to her what happened to us, what happened to her in that room that day. When I went to South Africa, I met her parents. These were the 2 humblest people you ever want to meet. They were so happy that their daughter had returned to her Yiddishkeit. And not only that, we had a Shabbos meal during the week. And you know what? South Africans, if any of you have ever been to South Africa, prides themselves in their hospitality. And they, in my humble opinion, can compete with any 5-star hotel. I'm just going to close out with you how I came to the realization that I was converting to Judaism, and then I'm going to leave some room for questions and answers. I was invited to Israel to study Hebrew at Opanakiva by Shulamit Katz-Nelson, and here I was in Israel for Tisha B'Av. I'm no stranger for fasting, so I did the fast, and not only that, I had a group that was scheduled to come to Israel for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but there was a bus bombing, so the group canceled, and it was about 6 weeks between that time, so I stayed at the Moriah Hotel. I had met this lovely Orthodox family that lived in Old Katamon, and not only that, his name was Rabbi Goldberg, and they invited me to spend Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with them. I went to an Orthodox shul for the first time in my life, Bet Knesset Yakar in Old Katamon. Rabbi Mordechai Goldberg had to explain to me why we were taking this apple, dipping this apple in the honey, and there was also this fish head on the table that looked absolutely repulsive, and it looked like these 2 eyes were staring at me the entire night. Finally, I got the courage to ask Rabbi Mordechai. I said, we don't have to eat this thing, do we? He said, no, Ahuva. It just represents that man is the head, not the tail. Finally, we're coming up on the holiest day of the entire year, Yom Kippur. Once again, I called his wife, Abigail, and asked her, was there anything I needed to do to prepare myself for Yom Kippur? She said, Ahuva, the Jewish people fast, but you're not Jewish, so you're not obligated. I did the fast. I walked back to Bet Knesset Yakar. I walked in the door on Kol Nidre. I sobbed all the way during Kol Nidre. I did not know at that time that Kol Nidre was a nullification of all past and future vows. Neither did I know that you don't talk during Kol Nidre, but I certainly know that tonight. I looked at this lovely lady that was standing next to me. The more I sobbed, the more Kleenex that she passed over. And I looked at her and I said, I have no idea what is going on in my life. She kept passing the Kleenex over. She tapped me on the shoulder. I left Bet Knesset Yakar. I walked down the streets in Jerusalem. This is the holiest environment I had ever been in my life. I was still an ordained minister, but I could feel the Kedusha. In my humble opinion, there wasn't a leaf on a tree moving, a bird in the sky. There wasn't a kid on a bike. There was not an airplane or a car or a motorcycle. There's a pasuk in Isaiah 40 that says this: every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the crooked places shall be made straight, the rough places shall be made plain, and the glory of Hashem shall be revealed. All flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of Hashem has spoken it. I feel like that's exactly what had happened to me in my life. I had been on this search mission, if you will, for 48 years, and it all culminated in the courts of Kol Nidre. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my story. You have been a very delightful audience. And I'm going to close out with a pasuk in Mishlei that simply says, trust in Hashem with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge God, and He shall direct your path. Behold, that Aka De'ehu, in all your ways know Him. And now if you have any questions, if you want questions, we'll take questions. Yes?
I wanted to ask, when you came out of the mikvah, how did you feel? Like, what was the feeling?
That's a very good question. When I came out of that mikvah, not coming out of the mikvah, but it's what happens in the mikvah. Our rabbis of blessed memory, there are 2 opinions. One opinion is that you already had a Jewish neshama. The second opinion is that the Jewish neshama is born again, or reawakened, or made alive.
I have to honestly say I hold with that first opinion that I already had a Jewish neshama, because in my opinion I've been headed down this path my entire life. But I had a spiritual fine-tuning. There's a person in my neighborhood that is a very well-known rabbi, and after he saw me a couple of months after my conversion experience and I went to the mikveh, he tells a neighbor of mine, he says, you know, she doesn't look the same. And I said, I'm not the same. I'm not the same person. Baruch Hashem, it was an incredible experience. And in my humble opinion, every day as a Jew is an incredible experience. It's what I make it with Hashem's help. Yes. Any other questions? That's a great question, by the way.
That's great. I have a question.
Yes.
How did you select your name?
The question is, how did I select my name, Ahuva? I was given my name, Ahuva, by Rabbi David Rosen. He used to head up the Anti-Defamation League in Jerusalem. And I happened to be in his office one time with a friend of mine, a Jewish documentary filmmaker, Ruth Brody Sharon. And I was asking him a lot of questions about Abraham Avinu's wife, Hagar. And he looks at me and he says, and now, you know, they changed her name to Keturah. And he looks at me and he says, your name should not be Delores, it should be Ahuva. I looked at Ruth and I said to Ruth, I said, whenever we're in Israel, please call me Ahuva. And she and I worked on this project together 3 consecutive years. And every time we were in Jerusalem, she called me Ahuva. And when I went to the mikveh, I kept the name. I thought it was a very beautiful name. And I had not ever heard it before. I spelled mine with the H on the end, which means beloved of Hashem. Yeah.
By the way, you have like, I think 45,000 hits on Google. I just came up with your name. It's like 45,000 hits.
I know, it's crazy. I didn't even know those things did that. And one time the yeshiva boys start showing up at my house now. They come for Shabbos meals and all. I don't have girls and boys at the same time. But this one kid that was a convert, he came up to my house once and he needed to use the computer. And he goes, Ahuva, let's type your name in there and see what comes up. And he did it. I'm going, oh my God, I don't believe this. This is crazy. But if anybody wants to know anything about a person, just
Like the whole world knows about it.
it's true. Go to Google and it's there. You're right. It's about I don't know how many pages. You're right. I had no idea. I'm serious, but this kid knew. I mean, these young people know everything there is to know about computers. They know a whole lot more than I do. Yep. I think anywhere I've lectured in the world is on Google, because if you did an advertisement, I guess whatever, they collect it, right?
It looks,
I guess that's what.
I didn't go through every single one of them, but I was personally searching for the Aisha Torah article that even interviewed by you.
Okay,
That's the
Sarah
first
Shapiro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, that's
Yeah.
the first time I got to know about you.
It's true. Any newspaper article, most of them, you're right, they're there. When this kid showed me this, I had no idea. It's interesting. What can I say? Yes.
You said that your grandmother taught you Tehillim at the age of 4?
Yes. In English. I learned the book of. I started learning when I was 4 years old. Psalms, 23rd Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures.
So Tehillim is in...
Christians feel just as close to those Psalms as they have universal appeal. And our rabbis of blessed memory said King David knew that when he wrote them. We have this midrash that says King David had a desire that he wanted to live forever. And the midrash says every time someone quotes a Psalms, a Tehillim, it's as if his lips move in the grave. They definitely have universal appeal. I've always loved Psalms. I'm serious.
So what do they call in English? Tehillim?
Psalms. Psalms.
Oh, Psalms.
Psalms.
The whole book is translated?
The whole book is in English, 1 through 150. Yeah. They were in my Christian Bible that I used to take everywhere I went.
So people do read it? Or?
They met.
Yes?
They read them. Yes. I used to read them all the time myself in English before I learned Hebrew. They're beautiful.
Did you
Yeah.
notice that the Hebrew and the Christian Bibles are almost the same? Did you compare? Or?
They are different, and they mistranslated some things intentionally to fit their theology. There were
This was true one.
I beg your pardon?
How did you know this was the true?
Because I spent 14 years studying the Torah, and I was looking for the emes. I did. I taught my own self the Hebrew alphabet. I spent 14 years studying the Torah. Every year, January 1st and December 31st, according to the secular calendar, I would study my Bible, end of the year, close it out, start at the beginning. I love Bereshit. Bereshis Elohim bara bashamayim va'aretz. I love it. And the more I studied the Torah, the more discrepancies I found in Christianity. Every convert I've met, in my humble opinion, all of our stories are the same. Our faces are just different. We're all looking for the emes. It just took me a little bit longer to get here. I was very, career-oriented and involved. I've always had a busy life. However, this is more fulfilling than anything I've ever done in my life. Traveling the world. One of the most beautiful things, I think, who would have ever thought that my grandmother, who was a granddaughter and a daughter of sharecroppers from Mount Bayou, Mississippi, would have Jewish women all around the world saying Tehillim with their children. I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, and Shira Taylor, that's not her actual name, the story that I shared with you about this girl in this book that returned to her Yiddishkeit. We're in this kosher milky restaurant downtown Johannesburg. Owner walks over to me and she says, "Are you Ahuva Gray?" I said, "Yes." She says, "I want you to know I'm saying Tehillim with my children because of your grandmother. I'm in Melbourne, Australia, lecturing to these religious girls. End of the lecture, this girl comes over to me and she says, "Ahuva, I want you to know I'm saying Tehillim every day because of your grandmother." I was in London and lecturing to the Hadass. That's a very, very religious group of women in London, in Golders Green. And this lady comes over to me at the end of the lecture and says, "Ahuva, I'm saying Tehillim with my children because of your grandmother." All I can say is Mashahu. Who would have ever thought that a woman that was a daughter of a sharecropper from Mount Bayou, Mississippi, would have Jewish women all over the world saying Tehillim with their children? And in my humble opinion, when I travel the world, it's not so much my story I'm sharing. It's the story I'm sharing about the two women that influenced my life the most, which was my grandmother and my mother. May they both rest in peace. Yes?
I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned that the family was very supportive of your decision. At no point did they feel like you betrayed them or something like that in making this decision to go so far away from the way you've been raised and all you've known your whole life?
That's a very good question. My family had seen me my entire life stay up late at night with books all over. I always loved reading, and I was always one of these people that researched and highlighted books and marked them all up and wrote things in there. It should have been written this way. And my mother was very, very, very accustomed to me studying my Bible very, very in depth. And even when I told my parents that I was converting to Judaism, my mother looked at me and she what was interesting, my mother looked at me and gave me a look as though she was looking through me, because my mother really knew me, and she knew me better than anyone else because, number one, she was my best friend. My mother and my father, I did not ever have a argument or a disagreement with either one of my parents because they taught us kivod avim, aim, at a very early age. But my mother looked at me and she said this, "Delores, I know any decision you have made about God, you thoroughly investigated. I have personally learned love and tolerance from my family. And the reason we have a relationship is because we don't talk about religion. I mean, religion, the first murder in the Torah was committed because of religion, Cain and Abel. So we find other things to talk about, and that's what we do. But we genuinely love each other, and I'm very happy that I have a relationship with my family. And when I go to Chicago, my nieces and nephews are going to have all my OU chicken of the sea and my salad dressing and my bagels, because they say Auntie Ahuva has to keep kosher. And they like it, paper plates and plastics and napkins. And we all have a meal together. They have theirs and I have mine. But it's a delight. It's a mahaya to me that I still have a relationship with my family. And the reason we have a relationship is because we work on it. And in my humble opinion, I think sometimes that I've had an easier time with my family than sometimes Ballet Tshuva had with theirs sometimes. It's not so, it's low pursuit. It's not simple. When you're... No, the question is, do I have any children? I was married for 19 years, and I've been divorced for many, many years. Now, my ex-husband could not have children. And I am looking for a shidduch. You know what, ladies? I've been on dates around the world. In my humble opinion, it's all timing. But the one thing I find amazing, though, is this. If anyone had said to me I would be unmarried and no children and happy, I wouldn't have believed it. I'm very happy, Baruch Hashem. I am Kanai Nahara, 62 years old. First in Nisan, I'll be 63. And thank God, you know what? True happiness is fulfilling the Ratzon of Hashem.
Well, you don't have 62.
I know, my sister gets angry with me whenever I tell my age. I've always told my age, and for shidduch purposes, I have to tell it anyways. So it's a lo norah. It's no big deal. I could care less. Girls, don't tell your age if you don't have to. Yes.
You said that a lot of comers, they look for emet, and what advice would you give to people who are Jewish but Orthodox and are trying to find the emes, but they can't see it, or sometimes they're just blinded by it?
You know, unfortunately, we have a lot of cases in Israel of religious kids going off the derrick, and it's happening here in America too. I'm sure it's happening here. What we have to do is this: we as Jews, we have to learn to really love each other on a very, very deep level and be concerned about one another. And I'm not saying we don't. And I think that when someone is off the derrick, if there's something we could do to bring that person or that individual back to their Yiddishkeit, we have a moral obligation and a responsibility to do that. I am a convert, and to me, we are one neshama. And to me, a Jew is a Jew. I don't care if you Kippah, Shugad, Dati Lumi, whatever, Haredi, which is who I identify with me. To me, a Jew is a Jew. And all of if we could just stop all of our frictions and all of these things that happen within our Yiddishkeit and just come together. Everywhere I travel in the world, every Jew says they want Mashiach to come. So it's up to us. You know what? The power is really in our hands. I looked at this last election that America just did. All of if we as Jews could do what America did, is to come together and put aside our biasness. I think Mashiach would be here. It's true. And in my humble opinion, that's what it's going to take for us to come together. We are going to have to go through some more suffering, as the prophets say, because I spent 14 years studying the prophets. But what I do believe is we can do it. And the power is in our hands. And Hashem is bringing us to this. There is no other way to explain how a man that was in the Senate for 2 years could become the president of the United States of America and break all records and turn red states blue. This is the Yad Hashem. I went on a lecture tour throughout Europe for 8 days in Elul, and it was 7 countries in 8 days. And on the front page of every newspaper was the economy in America and a picture of Barack Obama. Yeah. What can I tell you? Guys, we're Hevlei Mashiach. That's how we feel in Israel. I don't know how you guys feel. We're Hevlei Mashiach. There's no other explanation of it.
Yeah, but the moment that he became a president, things are starting...
Birthing pains of Mashiach. Economists are saying that your economic situation is not going to improve. Latu Allah, they're saying it's going to hit bottom before it gets better. And you know the most important thing a Jew could be doing now, Jay? This is what we need to do. We as Jews. Every Jew needs to get up and daven with Kavanah, treat every Jew properly, give tzedakah, study Torah, and get close to Hashem. This is how we're going to bring Mashiach. And work on your midots. And this is my avodas Hashem every day. I want to just treat every Jew properly. I don't care if it's a secular Jew, whatever it is. But my desire in life is to just treat every Jew properly, every human being properly. This is what's going to bring Mashiach. Yes, that was a long answer to a short question. Yes, there was another question. So, yes.
My question is, as a missionary, what was your job? Like, were you supposed to convert people to Christianity?
I wasn't a missionary. I was an ordained minister. Or an ordained minister would be similar to a reform rabbi. I could marry people, bury people. I taught and I used to lecture. And I headed up the women's department in the church that I reported to, and there was a pastor there, so he was the overseer of that congregation, but I was not a missionary. And a missionary are people that try to get Jews to convert to Christianity. I did not ever attend a church that was a part of that type proselytizing thing, but I think it happens a lot in the Bible Belt, more in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, they do mostly like Saturdays. They bring these books to our apartment.
You probably Seventh-day Adventists, yeah.
They choose with any languages.
Yeah.
As long as these people,
right,
especially do this exactly on Saturdays,
right,
most of the time.
On the Sabbath, yeah.
Yeah, and they purposely catch which language do you understand. They purpose pushing you into
right.
it.
What it means is that Jews have to know their Judaism. I mean, we know the emes, but there are some, even in Israel they got Jews and they approach these people and they're becoming Christians. I mean, but that's because they don't know their Torah. Yeah. If you know the Torah, then you know it's sheker. You know it's sheker. It's foolishness.
But they catch them.
Yeah, they do. And that's why we have Jews for Judaism, who go out and protest against these and try to educate people and try to bring them closer to the Torah, same as your organization is doing. Hazak, educating, inspiring people. All of these things are important, and we're all in this together. Yes?
What was the biggest belief shift that you had to make from becoming a Christian to Jew, besides the obvious one of giving up Yashka? And how did you do that?
I studied for 14 years, and the more I studied the Torah, the more discrepancies I found in Christianity. The last church I used to attend was a very erudite man. His name was Dr. Charles C. Queen, and he taught the Torah in Hebrew, and he believed that God was one. And that's what started me on my path. My Rebbeson says that he prepared me for my Judaism, and he probably did. I don't think that was his intent, but he certainly... This man is the most learned man of anyone I know in Christianity.
So what beliefs did you have to let go of?
I let go of all of them. I stopped practicing Christianity for 5 years. I stopped going to church, and I stopped observing any of the holidays. I was going through a transition. I simply didn't know what the transition was.
It is very different.
What's very different?
The two religions.
Of course they're very different. They're totally different.
Well, besides J.
Yeah, they're very different. Totally. We, the Jewish people, are not expecting any physical manifestation of God. They believe totally opposite. They're totally different. When I first read in my Siddur, it's in our morning brachot, my God, the soul you placed within me is pure. You formed it. You created it. You will take it away from me and return it to me in times to come. When I read that the first time, I started sobbing, because it means that my neshama was pure. That is not what I was taught and what I believed in and what I was born into. When I first read that, I cried. Yeah. I thought it was so beautiful. Yes.
I just wanted to know, what's the church's perspective on like a person who does bad things, then they come to church, they cross their heart, and you confess, and all your sin gets wiped away? That is,
there's a difference between Protestant and Catholic and Catholicism. Catholicism is where they have, they go to the priest and confess their sins. I was in a branch of Christianity where we simply just pray to God, and you ask the God that I believed in at that time for forgiveness. So there are two different forms of worship. There are Protestants that believe that Catholicism is avodah zarah. So they are different. There are different teachings and different observances and different. Thank you so much. If anyone is interested, I have books in the back. And I just want to mention my third book, In Search of Hidden Treasures, which is going to be Hashkafa Prati stories interwoven around the Hagim. And it should be out by Pesach. Thank you so much.